I longed for the biting chill of the Yukon wilderness. How it nips at your face, toying with eyelashes, pressing frost-laden air against cheeks and swirling through hair. I yearned for the scent of pine and that crisp softness of fresh snow glistening in the pale winter sun. From up here, I can see the cabin where I spent my childhood. I see wooden churches tucked into evergreen forests like chess pieces scattered on a vast white board. I can spot ribbons of frozen rivers snaking through the valley, then vanishing behind the horizon where the northern lights dance in eerie silence. One of the trappers' outposts along the Klondike Trail, where fur traders pause to warm themselves, marks the beginning of this treacherous path. Blanketed in knee-deep snow and dotted with jagged rocks, the trail is nearly invisible. Truth is, no one even cares to notice it. Why would weary trappers stopping for a moment's respite bother to check on a perilous trail leading to nowhere? But I do. This is how I got up here, to the summit of this mountain where I stand now. I've trudged all the way up here, so I can finally end it all these years of terror and madness, pursuit and dread. This is where it's all going to come to an end. But for now, I am savoring the vista of the frozen wilderness below. I am inhaling what could be my final breaths of frigid air. It will manifest soon. It always does. Like a phantasm, it's been haunting me relentlessly, always there, just beyond the edge of vision. And there it is. Its formless figure materializes from the swirling snow behind a sharp bend in the trail. It senses me, then pauses for a moment as if gathering its otherworldly strength before resuming its inexorable approach. Or should I say, resumes its nightmarish glide. Years of ceaseless pursuit have taken no toll on its unearthly form. How long has it been stalking me? 10, 20, 30 years? It is slow, methodically slow. But for once, I will not flee. I will wait. Right here, behind this outcropping of rock, I will finally confront it face to face. This silver crucifix I clutch in my hand will soon pierce through its ethereal essence. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. This ends here, at the dead end of this snow-covered trail atop the mountain overlooking the valley, with its wooden churches and endless pine forests. Peculiar. After all these years, I still don't know the true name of my tormentor. I always called it what the old shaman named it, the Whisperer in the Pines. Whisperer in the Pines, listen, I will vanquish you. The shaman, the enigmatic Athabascan elder. I sought his counsel when I was in college. Many did, but I was different. It was 1995. I was a mediocre student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, drifting aimlessly from one semester to another with barely passing grades. I had few friends and almost no aspirations. One might say I was experiencing an early existential crisis. Besides downing shots of cheap vodka, my only other passion was Native American folklore. Legends of skinwalkers and wendigos fascinated me. One can imagine my excitement when I saw a flyer pinned to the bulletin board of the anthropology department. Spaces were limited, but who cared? It was the revered shaman himself, coming to give us a lecture on spiritual entities of the North. Like a man possessed, I rushed to the lecture hall hours before the talk. I was first in line, and when the doors opened, I claimed the front row seat. The room was soon packed with wide-eyed students, awaiting the arrival of the wise elder. And there he was, the blind keeper of secrets, walking steadily onto the stage with a gnarled walking stick, his apprentice by his side. We rose in respectful silence. He nodded and gestured for us to be seated. Then he began. The lecture delved into the spirit world, though I can't recall if it focused on benevolent guardians or malevolent tricksters. It hardly mattered. Somehow, I managed to sit through his entire discourse, which lasted over 3 hours, and remember nothing. He spoke slowly and methodically, his words like drops of glacial meltwater, his sightless eyes fixed on some distant realm. And then it happened. Something that shook me to my core. Before concluding, the shaman offered to answer questions from the audience. Of course, I raised my hand, as did scores of other students. The shaman's apprentice whispered something in his ear, which made him smile. It is an honor to share wisdom with young seekers, but our time in this realm is fleeting, he said, his unseeing eyes still focused on that faraway place. For that reason, I will select questions from 5 of you, guided by the spirits. I had never won any prizes or competitions in my life. When I gambled, I lost far more than I won. I knew my limitations, and that turned me into a passive, apathetic person, rarely striving to excel. And so, sitting still with little ambition, I had grown accustomed to that, until that moment. When I saw the shaman pointing his gnarled finger in my direction, it felt like a bolt of lightning. Me? Yes, young seeker. The spirits have chosen you. Step forward and speak your name, said his apprentice. I didn't know what to ask, so I quietly mumbled my full name. Ethan James Blackwood. The shaman's milky eyes shifted in my direction as if reacting to a distant wolf's howl. Ethan James Blackwood. Blackwood. Haven't our paths crossed before, young one? He asked. No, honored elder. I've never had that privilege. But we shall. Our paths will converge again, Blackwood. You and I will meet in the spirit realm. But for now, what is your question? The rest of the day was a blur. I don't even remember what question I asked. It must have been about protective talismans or spirit animals, not sure. And perhaps not important. No, not important at all. The most revered shaman in Alaska addressed me by name and then made that bizarre, surreal prediction about our paths crossing again. When? 9 years later, in 2004. And there I was, a somewhat promising journalist for one of Anchorage's somewhat sensational newspapers. Every week my byline appeared on the second page alongside celebrity gossip and urban legends. My salary was enough for a small apartment in Spenard. After years of being directionless in my studies, you could say I had become something more than average. Or at least that's what I believed. That day, it was early October, arguably the harshest season in Alaska, began as usual. I wolfed down my meager breakfast of instant oatmeal and black coffee at Kaladi Brothers and was ready for a brisk walk to the office. It was shortly after 8 a.m. and the sun had barely risen. My route was the same as always, past the park, right on Arctic Boulevard, left on Benson, another right on A Street. My thoughts that morning were preoccupied with the story I was working on, so I was trudging through the park when something caught my eye. Or rather, someone. At first, I paid little attention, no more than I did to anybody else in the park that morning. Homeless individuals huddled on benches was a common sight, and Anchorage was certainly no exception. So here was another unfortunate soul, sitting right behind the children's playground. Tattered parka, heavy fur hat, boots caked with frozen mud. A typical vagrant, as anyone might have thought. I thought so too, except this one had something that made my blood run cold. I didn't know what it was, but once I saw it, I felt an irresistible urge to instantly turn away and never lay eyes on it again. The way it looked at me, that haunting gaze that made me think of a line from an old Inuit tale, that being's got to be banished. There certainly was something otherworldly about that being. Its eyes, as if carved from glacial ice beneath its hood, were mercilessly drilling thousands of tiny holes through me. I quickened my pace. As I glanced back one last time, I noticed it slowly gliding towards me. Past the playground, onto the street, paying no attention to screeching tires of honking cars, gliding right towards me. It's just a homeless person. No, it is not. Just another unfortunate soul seeking warmth. No, no. Run, run, run. Arctic Boulevard was deserted like an abandoned gold mine. I could hear my rapid footsteps crunching on the icy sidewalk. Or was it the pounding of my heart against my ribs? It was gaining on me. Run? Don't be ridiculous. Yes, run. First slowly, as if you're trying not to show your pursuer that you're terrified. No, not terrified. More like in a hurry. Why am I running? I can defend myself if needed. But it really wasn't about that. It was my first experience of that feeling, which I can only describe as some sort of primordial sense of terror, panic, dread, an unexplained sense of impending doom looming above like a dark spirit with outstretched claws. I ran faster than my legs could carry me. As I turned the corner on Benson, I paused and looked back, fearing to see it right behind. Instant oatmeal and black coffee were about to make a violent reappearance. Wiping the cold sweat off my palms onto my coat, I bent forward in a protective stance and scanned my surroundings. Empty windows of Arctic Boulevard stared at me like a child witnessing a parent's moment of weakness. Whatever that entity was that had driven me into this uncontrollable panic, it was now gone. Shame on you, Ethan James, I repeated to myself while making futile attempts to calm my racing heart. Shame on you. I mumbled, repeating that word. Mumbling turned into whistling a haunting Athabascan melody. Shame, shame. I whistled, feigning composure. I hummed without knowing the words, only to distract my mind. I hummed so others wouldn't notice me trembling. I climbed the stairs of my office building, 3 at a time. 3rd floor. The familiar smell of newsprint calmed me down. Safe haven. Shame on you, Ethan James Blackwood. Even now I question whether my descent into madness began on that day or had been underway for many years. Madness that creeps in and recedes like the tide of the Bering Sea. Is that how it usually happens? All I know is that an hour later, I was laughing at my moment of weakness. Preposterous and nonsense, my thick Alaskan drawl spoke to me. The idea of being fully examined by a psychiatrist did cross my mind, and I immediately thought of Dr. Rasmussen in Midtown. He'd give me a convenient diagnosis like acute anxiety and prescribe some little white pills, I thought. Little did I know that the day had more horrors in store. The nightmarish script continued to unfold when my editor marched to my desk with a stack of papers. No, Blackwood, you are not going to see Dr. Rasmussen in Midtown, who will pass judgment on your sanity. Instead, you are going to cover a story on the old shaman's final prophecy. He is making his last public appearance today at the Alaska Native Heritage Center and blah, blah, blah. I forgot about the panic attack. The thrill of seeing the revered elder again, 9 years later, was surreal. Moments later, I was sitting in a cab on my way to the Heritage Center, scribbling all possible questions I should be asking him. The spirit world? Ancient prophecies? Forget it. I knew very well what I would ask. I paid the driver and trudged through the snow up to the entrance where the elder was about to give his final address. I elbowed my way through the crowd of journalists to claim the coveted front row spot. Quick inventory check. Wallet, notepad, and the ever-present silver crucifix. Seconds ticked by on my wristwatch. 4 more minutes. Forget this morning's terror. Forget Dr. Rasmussen. Pull yourself together, Ethan James. Blackwood, that's your family name, isn't it? Yes, honored elder. But how do you... 9 years ago at the university, I told you our paths would cross again. Do you remember? I nodded rapidly, completely forgetting he couldn't see me. Foolish. Perhaps, continued the shaman, it would be more prudent for us to commune privately after the gathering. I invite you to share sacred tobacco with me. You respect the old ways, don't you, Mr. Blackwood? I shall expect you precisely at the hour of the wolf at the place that my apprentice will reveal. His blind eyes were still fixed on some distant spiritual plane, far above all the eager journalists and ardent followers of his mystic wisdom. The attention was now all on me, as revealed by the sudden silence and intense stares from behind. I thought of all the explaining I would have to do tomorrow. How does the shaman know you? Are you his protege? You were raised in Fairbanks? Are you his long-lost grandson? Back then I did not know. Answers came later. Memory is a fickle spirit. As I gaze over the frozen valley and fill my lungs with the familiar scent of pine, I cannot recall anything specific. Vague and elusive memories of my childhood home, and these forests, and the old trading post itself. Nothing but an incomprehensible sensation somewhere deep in my chest. I close my eyes and let the wind paint swirling patterns of snow against my eyelids. I am trying to focus without looking. Alas, nothing comes to mind. I've been robbed of my memories. I cast my eyes at the trail again. It is closing in. It's difficult for it to move against the howling wind, and yet I see that otherworldly determination in its approach, in the way it periodically pauses as if gathering strength from the very air around it. I am not going anywhere. 5, 10 more minutes? Come and claim me, ethereal horror. If you can. I almost see its facial expression beneath the swirling snow that forms its visage. It's a grimace. It's an expression that says, "We shall see." Once I read an interview in the Anchorage Daily News. In it, the shaman was portrayed as extremely humble and minimalistic. His dwelling was depicted as a perfectly organized space with easy access to everything. Sacred objects on the shelves, judging from the admiration of the columnist, there were many, were arranged by purpose and by power. Ceremonial pipes and medicine bundles were grouped together on the same rack, so he could find them easily. In another article, dated 2000, I read that when the shaman travels, and those journeys were quite extensive, he carries a whole bundle of sacred items, some of which may not even be used. When I entered his hotel room, That very bundle of sacred objects was the first thing that caught my eye. I stood perplexed at the multitude of items, most unknown to me, when I heard the door swing wide open, and there he was entering through the doorway with a leisurely swinging cane. "Ah, Blackwood, how kind of you to heed the spirit's call." I took a step towards him and produced some gibberish like, "The honor is mine." He half smiled and pointed his hand to a chair. "I know you will quite enjoy the taste of this sacred tobacco." The shaman sat down and leaned slightly backwards, without releasing his cane. "Do you know the greatest advantage of being blind?" he asked, and answered immediately. "The blind see with the eyes of the spirit, so the physical world holds no power over us." He chuckled at his own wisdom, only to be interrupted by his apprentice carrying a ceremonial pipe filled with aromatic tobacco. Amazing how the very idea of participating in an ancient ritual instantly changes your mood before you even take your first puff. As I was readying to launch into a pre-scripted monologue of expressing my gratitude and honor, the shaman jumped right to the heart of the matter. "I will speak plainly, Blackwood, about you being here and about me remembering you. I know you have many questions. I will attempt to answer some but not all. When you leave this place, there will still be mysteries that you will have to unravel on your own.